Welcome, everyone, to episode 93 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Penteleresco. I write stuff and podcast too, and today is a return of one of my favorite people I've ever chatted with on the podcast, Adam Dreece. Adam was crazy enough to launch 2 books in 1 month, and we get to talk to him about that and a lot more in just a minute. But before we get to Adam, let's talk about some wonderful things. We are 3 weeks from my live podcast. 3 weeks from my 100th podcast. And if anyone hasn't done the math here, you got it. My 100th episode of the podcast is going to be the live podcast. And I probably should mention my second guest. My second guest has been on the show before. He was a lot of fun to talk about. We talked about Bradbury. We talked about some blaxploitation. And because of that, I'm just going to take a second to put on the song. There we go. So, without further ado, he has got Coffin Hot Press going. He is a writer, a publisher, an editor, all around jack of all trades, amazing, hot gothic, Axel Howerton. That's right, Axel will be back on the live podcast. It'll be a little different. Probably it's going to be a little shorter interview, but it'll be a lot of fun nonetheless. And I'm looking forward to seeing Axel. And I got one more guest to reveal. She's also been on the show before. I'll give you a hint there. So if you look at my archive on YouTube, she is one of the people there. You can go to my YouTube channel, by the way, to listen to my conversation with Axel. One of my biggest snafus was the gap of space, but that happens. And I'll have a lot more to talk about after we get to the show here. So let's get right into it with Adam and stick around. Got some real cool other things to talk about. All right, let's get on with the show. Looking for my archive episodes of Just Joshing? You can do so on my YouTube channel, Joshua Penteleresco, JOSHUAPANTALLERESCO. There you will find past episodes with guests like Susie Vidori, Ron Bender, Ella Beaumont, Colette Turner, Chadwick Ginther, and more. Check out my YouTube channel right now.
We always just have these great conversations anyway.
Yeah. There we go. They're on. So I'll start from the Alice stuff and we'll go from there. So when I wrote Alice, I couldn't think of it like a different way of putting it. It's like her in the same time it's been done to death. I'm like, wait a minute, what if? And then again, when I figured out the Pandora's box connection, it was like, okay, this works. I can actually now play with Greek mythology. Mm-hmm. Like, she makes Medusa in the actual story. Like, Medusa before is a knight. She has a Gorgon tattoo that turns everything into stone. That's her actual power. The snakes come in the actual, or episode 1 or 2. I haven't decided yet on that, right? And where just being around Alice for too long just alters the world. All right, and in episode 0, she's held captive by playing cards. The other thing I'm throwing into this is game theory. Cards are 0. A maze is episode 1, like Labyrinth. That's a very Greek thing. Yeah. Right. Then episode 2 will be chess. Episode 3 will be different games as she plays the games.
With the complexity increasing.
Yeah, with the complexity. Cool. Yeah, until finally she's finding pieces of her kingdom and restoring them. As she restores them, though, she gets sick. So it's an interesting. She's literally a pandemic, which is a paradox. By solving the problem, she may not make it to the end.
She's the beginning and the ending.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's next year. This year, I still got a horror story. I barely started. I'm behind on that because of this. I got a little girl, a unicorn that farts rainbows, and a zombie monster trying to save their dad from prison. That's the little small. I call that the side quest story.
Cool.
Yeah, basically a girl genius uses again, and the zombie mobster you met is in that one too. Just as kind of like her sidekick now because, well, without spoiling too much, her daddy does end up getting caught. And the pony's kind of like that the unicorn's kind of the promise that I'll get in 5 to 10 years, I'll get you that pony.
Cool.
I'm a little nuts, what can I say? But anyway, I gotta start. I guess we should actually talk about what you're doing. First off, 2 books in 1 month. Why?
So, yeah. Well, let's see. The last Yellow Hoods. So I put up book 4, The Yellow Hoods, in October 2015. And that was the 4th book in 2 years. And I put out a mini book, right? Snappy and Dashing. So after that, I needed a break. So I wrote season 1 of The Wizard Killer and brought that out a year ago now. Then I brought out Men of Cloud 9 last September. And all the while, I was letting my brain kind of rest up for bringing out book 5 of The Yellow Hoods. And I'd hoped to bring out season 2 of The Wizard Killer around January this year. But life timing and getting sick from pushing myself too hard last fall kind of shifted all of that. And so I ended up with this funny problem of I can get the timing to work for both of them for April. And I was unwilling to sacrifice one set of fans. The Yellow Hoods fans had waited, a year and change for the next book, and it, I'd written the strongest book I think in the series. But on the other side, the folks who picked up The Wizard Killer, and I said it was going to be coming out next episode, 6 to 9 months. Now I've been waiting, so I thought, I've got to really push myself. I'm going to get both out. I'm going to hit the new con season, and that was the ludicrous idea. It was kind of neat writing both, like finishing one and then blitzing over to the other one while beta readers are reading the first and then kind of coming back. I found the intense style that I used for The Wizard Killer definitely translated over in a good way to The Yellow Hoods.
I imagine it was kind of like for you, almost like a constant refreshing, because I always do different things at once myself, right? I'm nuts, but anyways, that's besides the point. But I find that what happens is I'll work on, let's say, a comic script, because it's a very different part of my brain, and then when I'll go back to what I'm working on before, suddenly it's not like I have a brand. It's like I've been refreshed. Did that kind of happen with you?
Yeah. One of the things I got to be careful to do is I can't have. I use a car model these days when I'm explaining it. It's like there can only be one driver.
Yeah.
There can be a passenger, front passenger who's next up, and they might relieve the driver every now and then. And all the other stories are the kids jumping up and down in the back seat, right? They're like me,
yeah.
Quiet, no, I'll put you in the trunk. So, hashtag bad father. But anyway, so for me, what I needed to do is I had to I could make notes, for example, for season 2 of The Wizard Killer, but I had to drive The Yellow Hoods to a solid draft point where I could send it off for like an alpha review from somebody. And in doing that, I needed to let that part of my brain kind of rest, so the passenger and driver swapped. And yeah, I came back to it refreshed when now they had to swap back and keep going. And then as soon as the day the sky fell, book 5 of The Yellow Hoods, was off to the editor, then they swapped and I hit the gas for season 2 to try to make sure we'd hit the mark.
Yeah. So okay, so you have 2 different series going. This one you're kind of hitting your stride with. Whereas The Yellow Hoods, you kind of like hit that, it's done, or at least that part of the story is done.
Yes.
So we'll start with The Yellow Hoods. Was that hard?
Yeah, when I needed the extra time to figure out, was I going to write 10 books? Was I going to stick to the 5? Was I going to write 6? Because I had some ideas for books 6 to 8 easily, and then a 9, 10 that I could do. But the story arc that really starts in book 2 was coming to an ice end. The character journeys that begin in book 1 on the very first page now came to a really nice, clean ending, and the story all takes place within 2 years, right, from book 1 to 5. So it's almost like I felt the characters earned a rest, like anymore, and I'm like an abusive author. Hashtag again, bad father. But deciding to land that plane and then saying, okay, look, this series is done. I always intended to write a sequel series, and I will, and I actually tell you what it's going to be called at the back of book 5, but I also revealed that I'm going to be doing some spin-off work. So that allows me to take some of the secondary characters, change up the format a bit, also take some of the lead characters more in isolation, and show what happens between the end of the Yellow Hoods and 10 years later when we're going to get to the mark of the Yellow Hoods. And my grand idea since the really early days was to be able to have a third series which would have T and Ellie the age of T's parents from the first pages of book 1, right? So you get that kind of full life cycle. That's the grand idea. We'll see if I get there.
It'd be interesting because, like, from a story perspective, it's interesting because you go through things and then you see, like, younger people. I don't have kids yet, so I can't say my kids, but you see them going through the things that you went through, and you're like, and I can't say a word. I imagine that would be an incredibly frustrating thing.
Yeah, and it's like, you can't, if you got into heroing and your parents were in heroing and you realize that's running in your blood, and they tried to raise you in an area where you wouldn't know that, but it's almost like life came and found you and brought you in, then particularly a character arc for like T is going to be, she knows that. So as that adult, from whatever scars or whatever she's gone through and whatever peace she wants to bring to her kids, there's going to be that moment where she realizes, she can't escape this. This is almost fated. So what do you do, right? Do you do the same things your parents did, which is try to hide it, or do you take the different path? And so that ultimately is that storyline I'd like to get to.
Yeah, because that's an interesting thing, because very rarely, I mean, don't get me wrong, the age-old wizard mentor thing is a really cool character in fiction, but very rarely do they get takes on her stage. And I understand why, because there's not much. I mean, they've been through it all. So in terms of a reader discovery kind of point of view, they're almost cynical. They're like, I've been there, I've done that.
Well, I think one of the things that I did with the Yellow Hoods, right, is when you go from book 1, which has what I call a seemingly innocent beginning, and you go through. I mean, there's a lot of growth. There's a lot more maturity that comes through, and so my idea is that these other 2 series would continue that. So somebody who was 9 years old when they read book 1, right, being at the youngest end of the spectrum, by the time I would finish that 3rd series, right, that person's probably going to be somewhere in their 20s.
Yes.
Right? And anybody who kind of reads it as as a new adult would potentially have a family. And so they get to have this real emotional transition, as opposed to a lot of authors will write books for the same age group all the time. I like that idea that I've got this, I'm going on a journey with you, and I'm telling a tale that I'm hoping will connect with you as we go.
Basically, you J.K. Rowling it. So she did the same thing with Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, actually. I think it's smart, because it also maintains your readership, and ideally, hopefully, if they come along for the ride, they grow with you, which is actually a really cool. It's almost a symbiotic journey. Very cool. So the other thing is, I know this because I'm on my 2nd series. They get bigger than you anticipate after you get by the first book. You're like, this is...
I think of it as a V, right?
Yeah.
You kind of start, when everything's fresh, you can just make crap up, right? And you're going a million miles an hour, woohoo, this is fun. Then you get to the 2nd book, and it's like, but I need to kind of make this bigger. I constrained myself before, and you kind of open it up. And then the danger point I found for me was book 3. Right? Where it's like, one, the anxiety is really high because the first book you put out there, you're like, I don't know if anybody's going to like this. And then the second was like, holy crap, I got to write something that's at least as good as the first one because a lot of people liked it. And then by the 3rd one, you're like, how the hell can I do this? But yeah, I mean, that I think for me was my danger point of really pushing readers the maximum amount of stuff I could stuff in. And then I had to start really sculpting it in, almost finishing the diamond up for book 4, and then bringing book 5 really to a sharp tip.
I'm sorry, I just had this image of you bringing a kitchen sink with all this stuff and trying to stuff it into a book.
Get in there.
Yeah. I actually had that thought just cross my head with it, and it actually does fit to what you carried over.
Well, it's funny because I was listing out when we did the launch of The Day the Sky Fell. What was it, 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah.
And I was listing for myself all the secondary characters, right, and the tertiary characters who if it was a TV show, they would have a named role, and you would recognize them when they came back in. And some of them didn't play frequent roles, but they played key roles. And I was astonished, like, oh my God, these are a lot of different characters. And the great compliment that I get from readers and all the reviews was that I made it so that it was still completely digestible and understandable, and it was just alive. But that was where I was like, okay, there's that maximum point where you got to curtail things and start
I think
characters, writing them out.
No, yeah, I mean, there has to come a point, I think, with every series where there's like, it's not so much about the events, although, I mean, I'm really curious where you go for season 3. I'm really
for the Wizard Killer.
Yeah, I'm really curious. When you get to the end, you're like, that's a cliffhanger, right? That's exactly what I said. That's a cliffhanger. Okay. So I'll get there when I get there, whenever that is. But I mean, I find it. Again, this is something I've learned as my own journey as a writer. You can throw anything you want in terms of a story. Like you can literally write about Jar Jar. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, okay, how can I connect with the character, and that's ultimately what resonates more than anything else. So I'm curious, as you build the pieces in his life
for the Wizard Killer. Yeah. So let's talk about that then.
Yeah.
So when as you and I have spoken before, when I started writing this in its episodic fashion in the 120 word kind of micro arcs, and all of that going into as a season, like a binge TV show, that first season, or the first half of that first season, was very much the exploration. Okay, where can I go with this, right? And keep everything really constrained as much as possible, right? As opposed, no wizards floating down and firing fireballs out of their hands, right? But making it very much science fantasy. And then when I finished that season, I was curious whether or not I was going to be able to pull off season 2 that, one, would reward you for season 1, but 2, would really start setting things up. Like, can I do the same thing I did with the Yellow Hoods? The first book was kind of fun, and then the second book kind of anchored that 5 arc, right? 5-book arc. So when I got to about a third of the way through season 2, that's where everything started to crystallize. And then, by the time I got to the end, I ended up having to write a couple of episodes into season 3, almost like, just follow through. It was like, this happened, and then this happens, and this happens, and this. Okay, now I can calm down.
Yeah, so that's like, put it down. Something else takes my attention now. I get you. No, it just, because it ends on a heck of a note. I'm not spoiling a word, just because it goes into an interesting sequence, and then you come back to what I think is the real world. And that's actually my question. I mean, with this, because of the continuity of the story, I'm like, what exactly is this? All in the past, the present?
Mild spoiler alert. So it happens, I think, 2 or 3 times in book 1 where there's this. Let's call it sort of a flashback.
Yes,
right. There's another point in time. That, from the story point of view, seems to be in the past. And then I do that a lot more in season 2. But what I make you aware of in season 2 is it's not necessarily his past.
Yes.
And there's a continuity device.
Yes.
That allows all of that to make sense. I will confirm that there is a point where we do actually meet the character, and so there's a way to identify that. But for me, that was one of the cool things to do, also again as an experiment, which is flashbacks of it being you is one thing. Flashbacks of you almost being in somebody else's past, where the past seems to be mutable. Was kind of a funky. It's almost like a time travel effect.
Actually, so I had 2 thoughts when I first read that. First thought, number 1, is it was actually something that hadn't happened yet. I was like, that was it was like, he did it in such a way where it's like, this is a fractured thing. It's like, okay, wait, would he be devious enough to give you a taste of things to come? Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely. So it's like, is he devious enough? Yeah. So that was thought 1. The other thought, though, and this seemed closer to the truth, was almost like it was like some kind of bizarre lucid dream, right? Because again, he was interacting with it, but he wasn't at the same time, and it was like, I'm curious how he resolves that, and that's pretty much it. And I'm not spoiling much else of that. It definitely catches you because you're like, ba-dum, and we take a break. No. Wait, what? What happened here? Right? And And then you're listen, like, okay, this is interesting. Is it his copy? No, not exactly. That's the weird thing, right? It's like
well, one of the things I made sure to do with these flashbacks, and I'm tentatively calling them that, right? And I really don't want to spoil where it's going to go, but I did partway through this see, okay, this is where I get to by the end of season 5. And I have outlined a 3-book series that would take place before the events of this, right? So if this is the TV series, it would be like the prequel movies leading up to that. But I wanted to make sure within each of those flashbacks that they tied up neatly, so you didn't end up with this question of, okay, the next time I'm in a flashback, is it the same characters? So those micro arcs have to be almost like short stories that are complete unto themselves, but they've moved the plot of the whole season along. And I really do feel that I've tried to pick some of the best elements from my favorite comic books and from my favorite TV shows to be able to weave that together. And I've got to make sure that I give the rewards, right, those emotional rewards, more frequently when I'm doing something that's a little bit complex, because otherwise you lose the reader.
Absolutely. Speaking of comics, just a quick commentary, that's sometimes what happens with Grant Morrison stuff. I don't know if you've read it yet. It happens sometimes. He goes for something really cool, and as an idea, it's amazing, but he just misses that resonance.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I have to applaud his effort. But it's like, sometimes he just misses, and it's like...
Yeah, and you're left hanging. Or not hanging, but it's like...
It's not
you see
even,
what it could have been?
Yes.
And you're left almost with goo. Could have been solid!
Yeah, no, and by the way, it's no knock. I still love Seven Soldiers of Victory. That was amazing. But that all said, no, it's a really typical balancing act when you introduce something brand new. It's like, can you keep the character? Can you keep people emotionally invested? And that's a challenge with any kind of story.
And for the format, right? That idea that, instead of chapters, you've got 22 episodes. You've got 120 words on average, with 1 or 2 double episodes, or double length, I should say. My real challenge was making sure that I kept the intensity up. But at the same time, you can't take that kind of format and turn it into a 90,000 word book.
No.
Because you have to give, the longer the content, the more you have to give somebody a chance to breathe.
Yes.
Right? And so that's why I found this to be kind of magic at that binge read size.
Well, it's interesting too, because my next book is going to be around somewhere between 40 and 50,000 words. And I actually really dig that format. You can cram a lot into it.
Yeah.
And you're not. It's almost. I actually am kind of excited because I love dime novels as a kid, like the old school, like Edgar Rice Burroughs, Roger Zelazny's. I love that stuff. And now that seems to be all that's coming out now, which is kind of like for me, it's like I'm a kid in the candy store and I'm not allowed to shop, and I'll just buy them all, But I mean, that's like when I read this, it's like this is almost like, again, it definitely has a comic book thing, but it's almost like the old school pulp. It's almost like your old school pulp series. Is that a fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, when I was what was I? Probably about 17, 18 years old. I started writing with 3 other folks, and we were writing a pulp, what I call a 4-color 60s style comic book. And, where you have ridiculous character names, right? Like you'd have Bad Hair Dude, right? And
something really crappy like Johnny T. Danger or something like that.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Or over the top, where your power is your name.
Yeah.
So, and those were written as just serials, right? So it was that classic, okay, get next month's edition, right? And that taught me quite a bit about how do I keep my readership, because we had a collection of friends who would read them. And it also showed me kind of where are the limits, particularly when you're collaborating with others. But I loved that format, and then I kind of tucked that away, and then I had my software career, and then I had my author career up to the point where I was burnt out after writing the first 4 Yellow Hoods novels, and that's where I was like, you know what, I want to go back to that and I looked at all the comic books I still have in my basement, right?
I almost want to ask what you still have, just as an aside. But
well, at some point, when
yeah.
things are cleaned up a little bit, we can actually sit and go through some of the stuff. Right?
Yeah.
I've got my my original Death in the Family and Iron Man 1, and
I'm a little jealous just on that one alone. It's like that.
So yeah, I've got original McFarlane's and stuff like that. So yeah, shadow of what it used to be, but.
Well, no, I understand. I'm going through that myself. I'm finally at the point where my garnishing is done, so I can actually I can actually go through the. I'm still literally the next 2-3 months of just me catching up with everything I couldn't do. Yeah. But what's happening is, again, I got a whole bunch of comics I'm not going to read anymore, man. So I'm sneaking someone letters. One of the things I'm asking for a letter cover is an excuse for me to send comics. Like, here, take them away. Because there just comes a point you don't need all of that anymore. I mean, you just get to that point in your adult life where it's like, I really like this, and I really like this, but I don't. If you went away tomorrow, I wouldn't miss you.
Yeah.
And
if I had a fire,
yeah,
we had an apartment fire years ago, '99, and that's where you learn I can live without this stuff. I won't replace this stuff. I'll be sad that it's gone.
Yeah.
But then that'll just become a memory of being sad, and then I'll just have fond memories of what it used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like all my. I used to have binders and binders of floppy disks of games.
Yeah.
So at one point you gave up your collection, right? Either to somebody else or.
Well, yeah. I did that with Magic, like Magic the Gathering. I still like the game, but I can't.
I did it with my Heroes Clicks.
Yeah.
I had hundreds of them, and as an adult, as a dad, I couldn't play that often with folks, but also the folks that I was playing with, I wasn't entertained by it anymore. So I still have some collector ones.
Yeah,
but had to move on.
Well, no, that's it. Right? You just come to that point in your life and just realize I don't need this stuff anymore, or I don't need as much. I still am going to buy comics. I love comics, but I'm not.
Anyway,
it's
kind of funny because it ties, I find, also to series, and that was part for me of wrapping up the Yellow Hoods and saying, I've taken them on this journey. You never like those kind of series that comic books where they're just dragging something out. We'll never mention the original Spider-Man clone stuff, but
the arc that must not be named. But
yes,
go on.
yes, and I had a fan ask me at the launch of book 4 when I said that I had 8 books now in mind. She said, "Just do me one favor." She said, "Don't drag it out. Whatever it is, and you can always write more stuff, but what this arc is, just let it be." And that really stuck in my head. And it's that idea of letting something go.
Yeah, no, it's one of the hard. It's both it's the hardest thing to do initially, but also it feels the best when you actually do it, because when you know it's the right time, especially if it's on your terms. So that's when it's the absolute best, because then you're like, it shows your maturity as an adult. Right, and it was like your maturity as a person, like you beyond.
You just insulted me.
You just insulted me, man. No.
You made it dumb.
No, it's okay. I'm still look. In my bio, I'm still too immature for Netflix. It's actually in my bio. I can't do it. But anyways, the point is though. I mean, we all realize like when I the Watcher, Storm Dancer, and the last book come out called The Wandering God. I knew I need to do other things, and they deserve an ending. Guys, they're my characters, and it's like they deserve something, like a finite story. I could write them forever, but that's not fair to them, and it's not fair to me, and it's not fair to anybody that reads that series.
Yeah.
Right? And so there just comes a point where you're like, I've told my tale. This is the tale I wanted to tell, and it's great, and I'm happy I did it. And even Cloud Diver, I can go so many different directions with it, but I have 2 bookends. So when I get to the point where I feel like I've said everything I wanted to say, I get to the last bookend, and then I move on to something else.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it's like I said, one of the hardest things. I think as a kid, the hardest thing as a kid you have to learn sooner or later to life moves on and things change, and that's not a bad thing. And
actually, the irony is, there is a strong essence of that at the very end of the Yellow Hoods.
Yeah.
Right, no. Book 5, and I even put an epilogue in.
Yeah.
Because there's some really intense emotional stuff that happens. My favorite is getting either a text or a Facebook message or something from somebody who's just finished reading, going, "Oh my God, you've got me in tears! How could you do that to me?" It's like, "Did you change it?" No, it's right. It's just
No. But that's the best. Those are the best books.
Absolutely.
No, they're the best books because last book I actually cried at was The Dark Tower by Stephen King. That book made me cry. It actually made me cry. It was like you get to the end. And
actually, I should ask you because I got a quote from the reader's favorite folks after reading season 2, where they felt that the magic and the politics reminded them a lot of Gunslinger.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that. So
that the magic and the politics of the Wizard Killer reminded them of Gunslinger.
Yeah, no, actually, when I read this, like the initial thing, there's two things. It reminded me just a touch of Jim Patterson's kids stuff. The covers, especially, just were like he has like a series.
Okay.
But no, the story reminded me a little bit of Gunslinger, a little bit of Gene Wolfe's Earth of the New Sun.
Okay.
It reminded me a little bit of that, and it reminded me just a touch of Mr. Rogers' Lassie. That just reminded me that, like, you got kind of like it definitely it feels like Man with No Name. Like that's like it definitely has a Man with No Name like vibe to it, and that's definitely where like Gunslinger and drawing like there's a connection there. But you got it feels like a dying world, and that's the impression I got when I read that. And then when I thought of that, I thought Gene Wolfe. But also the fact that you compact so much in. I'm a huge Rogers Zelazny fan. They haven't given that away. I love his Amber series, and the fact that he compacted so many great story bits, arcs, character development. He did that in like 150 pages. Like he is the quintessential dime novel in terms of like what you can actually do.
Oh, that compression.
Yeah, that compression, and it's like. Format-wise, it doesn't quite beat the last, but you try that every time, and I feel like that's. So if I were to write a review, I'd be like this: it's Gunslinger meets Earth and New Sun, right? With a hint of the last Amber. There you go. So that's
now you have to write the review.
Okay. Yes, just a touch, because it's like I said, it feels like a dying world. I don't know if it's a dying world, but it feels like a dying world, and it's like, okay, we'll see where it goes. And when I get to season 3 and 5 seasons,
that's the plan right now.
Yeah, 5 seasons. So you got the Babylon 5 arc. 5 years. 5 years now. That's cool. Do you have the ending in your head?
Yeah, actually, in the past 3 weeks, I definitely see where the character ends off, and so it kind of reveals the whole season 5 to me. So the neat thing is not being a outliner who sticks to their outline religiously, right? It seems to be, okay, I think this is where we're going to end up. Now, for the Yellow Hoods, it came damn close, right, from where I was when I was halfway through writing book 2 to see where book 5 would end up. The details I didn't have at the time.
Oh yeah,
but in terms of where the character ends off, it's like there isn't a sweeter spot to leave them in, and it's going to have people going. It's like the story or the character arc makes sense, but how could you leave me? It's like that those TV series that end and you're like, yes, the whole theme and the plot and everything, it ends, but I don't want to. Like, why is that guy walking out of the room? I can't walk out of the room. I want to stick around with that person.
You do, but see, that's the cool thing about books. If you really want to go back, you can. That's the thing. You can always reread them all over again. And actually, sometimes you see things differently when you reread the second and third time, because now you see where the author was going here, and then there's all these little moments. I love the Wheel of Time. My favorite stuff in the Wheel of Time is when both is stuff like Matt and Swan, where they both have no clue of what the other's doing. That made me laugh so hard. It's like they both realize they don't know the other person well at all. But it was just like, you surprised me. It's like, yes. It's like, this is perfect. And like those little moments like that make that series work. Yeah, right? There are some parts where the series doesn't work, but again, there are arcs that shall not be named. So Wizard Killer comes out like literally now. Yesterday.
No, wait. Today's Tuesday. Today.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Do I dare ask what's next, or is this enough for right now?
You know what? No, you can dare ask. It's kind of funny. I've got a story called Permit Me, which is actually a nod to, I was talking about the superhero pulp stuff that I used to write. And then after I'd finished with that group, I wrote about 8 episodes of a character named Action Guy, right?
Awesome.
Truly over the top, right? And it like the stuff that I'd written way back then, Action Guy was over the top, filled with in-jokes and whatnot. And then about 2-3 years ago, I tried to revisit that character. I wrote 1 episode, and it's like it didn't really work. And then I saw an anthology that was looking for superhero stories, but dealing with an element of real life. And a story arc hit me, and so I wrote it. It didn't fit for their anthology, which was actually a bit of a relief when the feedback was coming in. I mean, it would have been nice to get it published, but when you have to shave a story down to kind of fit, and then you're like, okay, let me let it breathe. So I'm doing final revisions on that right now. It's a novelette.
Novella?
Well, no, I'm trying to figure 10,000 words. So
small novelette, somewhere in that.
Yeah. So that I'm probably going to try to bring out sometime in the summer. It's almost as a quiet additional release. Mind you, that's sort of what season 1 of The Wizard Killer was in some ways. It is a complete story, but it's the end. Like if you imagine kind of the fall from grace of a superhero, what happens next in life, right? It's that kind of story. However, I could easily do everything that fits right into that, right? Or almost write a series backwards. That was the end. What's the episode that came before that? What's the one before that? So
that's interesting. Also, you don't have to necessarily tell it in a linear way. You can just tell it at just moments, and then
like snapshots.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So I've got that, and I'm kind of riding 2 horses right now, or 3. Thanks to 4 days ago. So I've got season 3 of The Wizard Killer, which I'm trying to figure out what the best timing is for that. I've got my fantasy space opera called Tilruna, which I earmarked for coming out in the fall, and now realize what needs to occur in season 1. I need to lead into that. So I started, like we were talking just before starting the podcast, I've started writing season 0. Which might just be a really abbreviated thing, but I need to get that out of my system. And because from all the notes and everything about Tilruna, which I've been thinking about for decades, I'm not going to rush it. So I might easily shift that to April, which the second that I make that commitment, I'm going to be working on season 3 and season 1 of a lit RPG piece that has infected my head recently.
I'll tell you what. I'll make sure I give you Cloud Diver after you write that piece.
So you'll give me what?
I'll give you my Cloud Diver book after you read that piece, because that way it grants you. I somehow feel our writing styles aren't that similar. But I think because I definitely the way I do the episode arcs, level 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, 1 like I have a video game theme in mind. So I'm like, I'll be nice. It's like, here, wait till you're done. Here you go. This is what I did.
Well, I find whenever I finish something, like I like to binge on stuff. So absolutely,
I'll definitely hand it in to you.
That'd be cool.
All right. So, on that note, once again, if people want to find you, how can they find you?
Well, let's see. They can find me online at my blog at adamdreece.com. Dreece is spelled Dreece. They can find me on Instagram, Adam Dreece. They can find me on Twitter, Adam Dreece. You can find me on Facebook, Adam Dreece Author. All my books are available at Indigo, Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Smashwords, Google Play. So I'm available pretty much everywhere.
Awesome.
It's always a pleasure talking to Adam Dreece. And if you're going to go on my website Friday, you'll actually see a nice review of both The Day the Sky Fell and The Wizard Killer, because he's my friend and he's cool and he's done some really amazing things with both series. You should definitely, of the two, I have to admit I do prefer the Wizard Killer series. It's more for me. That all said, Yellowhoods is a really, really excellent young adult series. It's probably, I would say, about 5-10 years ahead of the curve of what young adult is today. If you like steampunk, if you like some reimagining of old familiar characters and new and wonderful settings, you should definitely take a look at that. And If not, if you want to try something a little bit, I would say a little bit more metal, check out the Wizard Killer series. All right. Before I go, my buddy A.P. Ukes was on the show not too long ago, and he was promoting the Adventures of Aurora Man, Axiom Man, which, as of this writing, is very close to their Kickstarter goal. They are currently about $700 away, and they just need a little bit more. Support. So to go to Kickstarter.com, look up the Adventures of Aurora Man, AURORAMAN, and Axiom Man if you want to help support their cause. Definitely give them a shot. And that is, as they say, that. I got a really cool guest for you coming up next. Someone I've wanted to have on the show for a long time. Can't wait. Beyond that, thank you very much for listening to the show. And if you want to support the show, you can do this in a number of different ways. You can subscribe to the show either through iTunes or Podomatic. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Joshua Penteloresco. You can buy my books, The Watcher and Storm Dancer, which are available through MirrorWorldBooks.com or Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. You can tell your friends about the podcast. That'd be great too. Let people know that I think I'm doing something really cool. But anyways, whatever you do, however you do it, thank you very much for listening. Stay inspired out there. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, whatever that is. And I'll talk to you guys soon. All right? All right.
Josh.